Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our fourth webinar in our six-part series. And today, this afternoon, we'll be talking about workload and stress management. And this is our Healthy Minds Thriving Workplace series. For those who have joined us before, thank you so much for joining us again. And for those who are new to this webinar series, thank you for being here this afternoon. So we will be recording this webinar and we'll be sending the recording through to all of you. So feel free to just sit back and absorb the information. And as always, we have time for Q&A after the workshop as well. So in terms of what to expect this afternoon, we're going to talk about workload and stress to begin with, and I'll run that through with you guys this afternoon. So we'll be unpacking the relationship between workload and stress and then exploring specific strategies that can assist in that space. After that, we will then move into work-life balance, and Miriam will be chatting that through with us this afternoon and looking at those specific initiatives and policies to support employees to achieve better work-life balance and why that's important. And then finally, we'll finish up with some stress management strategies and provide some practical resources and strategies that make a real difference in this space. And as I mentioned, as always, we'll have opportunity for Q&A this afternoon as well. And for those who are interested in our previous webinars, those recordings are available on the Leading Wellness website and also our YouTube channel as well. So to begin with, just some brief introductions. So my name's Dr. Simone Shaw. I'm a clinical psychologist and a clinical neuropsychologist. And I've been working in this space for over 16 years now. Early in my career, I was a rehabilitation coordinator for long-tail psychiatric claims or for dual diagnoses. I also worked as an EAP counsellor and a workplace mediator. I also spent a considerable amount of time working as conducting workers' compensation claim investigations for psychiatric injuries. Currently, I'm specialising in providing independent medical examinations for either neurological conditions or psychiatric conditions, and also providing executive coaching, strategic advice, workplace training. And so I have a sound knowledge in workers' compensation, industrial relations, and common law. So hopefully I can bring some of that expertise today in terms of the things that I've seen along the way. I'll now throw over to Miriam, who'll introduce herself before we get into some content.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Simone. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you all today. And just like Simone, we really hope that you get a lot out of this session from our experience. I'm also a psychologist. I'm specifically an endorsed health psychologist. And I've been working for many, many years as a coach, executive coach, life coach as well. So in my private practice, I assess, diagnose and treat people for a range of mental health presentations, as well as lifestyle and other concerns that happen in life. I do a lot of education work, providing workshops within the corporate space in both the public and private sectors around mental health in the workforce, improving literacy in that space, and also specifically leadership development programs focusing on skills around effective and authentic leadership. I have a particular interest in mind-body medicine. That is a real fascination of mine. And so I've created something called the Mainspring Method, which is a part of that. Don't mind us every now and again, the little slideshow bumping across. We've got two people trying to control it at the same time. It's a little bit sensitive. So that's just why sometimes the screen jumps. I also, in my entrepreneurial work, I do work in an area called photobiomodulation, which is also known as red light therapy. So I have a business with my partner that distributes devices and also supports practitioners with that. And my other forms of work include doing varying levels of academic education and lecturing in the space as well. So in this combination of skills, both Simone and I bring a unique flavour individually, and together we have a wonderful range of skills and our programs that we offer as part of Leading Wellness Solutions, where we work towards transformational change within workplaces. And so we love working with leaders and people who support teams, which is what this webinar series is all about, and tailor programs to meet organisational needs. So we're really excited to have you all as part of this program, and we hope you get a lot out of the webinar. I'll throw back to Simone to take it from here. Thanks, Simone.
Thanks, Miriam. So, to begin with, let's talk about workload and stress and unpack that relationship and explore strategies for managing workload. As I mentioned earlier, as we were just waiting for everyone to come and join us this afternoon, that even the best of us struggle sometimes in this space. So, let's have a bit of a reminder. To begin with, we want to just highlight the impact of high workload. So, we know that employees who are exposed to high workloads are more likely to experience burnout and physical health problems like cardiovascular disease. In terms of some other specific research, we know that high workload is linked with serious mental health claims, increased absenteeism, presenteeism, and obviously then a cost to the organisation in that space. The Black Dog Institute research from 2021 found that high workload is one of the leading causes of burnout among Australian employees. And individuals who are exposed to high workload for an extended periods are 1.5 times more likely to require mental health treatment compared to those with balanced workloads. And final piece of research from Beyond Blue in 2022 highlighted that chronically high workloads can lead to long-term mental health issues, including major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, and PTSD. And the Productivity Commission report underscores that addressing workload-related mental health issues could potentially save the Australian economy up to $17 billion annually by reducing absenteeism, presenteeism, and turnover. So if that's not enough of a justification of looking and addressing high workload, and not only do we have it as a psychosocial hazard in the workplace, then I'm not sure what other evidence we need in that space. So let's have a look now in terms of high workload. And what we wanted to just start off with is just considering your circle of influence, what's within your control and what's within your influence, and focusing on what's within your control is where you're going to get the most bang for your buck. So what you say, what you think, and what you do has a direct impact on what happens within in your environment. And then also things within your circle of influence as well. While not directly maybe within your control, you can have a part to play in that space. And then in terms of things that are outside of your circle of concern, then that's an opportunity to I guess minimize or to leave those ones to the side. And really, we want you to focus or get your staff to focus on things that are within your control and within your circle of influence. So what are some of the causes of high workload? We know that how a job is designed can impact on someone's workload. We know when staff have conflicting priorities that can lead to increased workload as well. We know that there can sometimes be a capability or skill set deficit, so the wrong person in the wrong seat, and that can lead to increases in workload just due to that capability gap. Sometimes there are unrealistic expectations, whether it's the staff member, whether it's the manager, or whether it's the client that are setting those unrealistic expectations. There can sometimes be a lack of communication between staff and different levels of management, and that can lead to high workload. There are also external pressures or demands. So whether that is something happening within the financial environment, whether it's a competitor, or whether it's something else that's happening outside, and that can lead to increased workload. Under-resourcing, we often hear that a lot with the work that we do in terms of we don't have enough people, we need more money, we need more people. So that can, when it is true, lead to high workload for the remaining team members. We also know that some people procrastinate or have poor time management, and we're going to hone in on that in terms of what are some strategies in that space. So let's unpack that. Sorry, our slides are being a bit fickle. So to start with, what are some of those common time management mistakes? So failing to keep a to-do list. So what am I meant to be focusing on here and today, or this week or this month? So where is our Gantt chart and what am I meant to be doing? So failing to do that can lead to having issues with managing one's time. Not setting personal goals. What is the key thing that I'm wanting to get through today? If there's just one win, and focusing on that before focusing on other tasks can be really helpful. Not prioritizing. So whether that's the individual themselves or not communicating with the rest of their team or with management around that. What are my priorities if something new has popped up? Failing to manage distractions and attention. We've got this wonderful IT around us, and now we're connected 24/7, and it can be overwhelming at times. So if we don't manage those distractions and have discrete periods of concentrating, that can be leading to issues with managing one's workload. We can also have issues with someone taking on too much or not delegating work appropriately, and thriving on being busy. Yes, I'll get that done, no problem. And then I guess, potentially suffering the ills of that. When we try to multitask, we can also have issues with time management as well. And we should be practicing what we preach, particularly as leaders and managers, in terms of taking breaks, taking our leave entitlements, etc. So when we don't do that, that can lead to some issues as well. And I'm not sure about you, but I dislike going to meetings that either have no agenda, go for a very long time, and are very disorganized and don't really have an action item at the end of that. So that can also lead to issues with managing one's time effectively. So what is the impact on high workload in terms of the individual employee? Well, working long work hours, not taking breaks, not speaking up or pushing back, blaming oneself for the struggle of not being able to get through that work, comparing oneself to others and going, well, how come they can get through that workload and I can't? Sometimes they self-medicate with substances. They can be irritable, have emotional outbursts within the workplace. They can take out their stress on others, and that can lead to conflict. And they can also wear a high workload or being busy as a bit of a badge of honour as well, and that's unhealthy. So what's sitting in the background here in terms of the common sources of workplace stress, and specifically when we're looking at workload and stress management, the thing that we wanted to highlight with you today is job design and role in terms of that clarity and demand and control. So webinar 1 looked at understanding psychosocial hazards. If you didn't have an opportunity to look at that, please feel free to go back and have a look at that webinar recording, which unpacks this in a lot of detail. But let's specifically look at this job design. So we know that how a job is designed can be, if it's poorly designed, can be a source of stress and a psychosocial hazard, or if it is designed well, it can be a protective factor, and specifically in terms of role clarity. If I know what's expected of me as an employee, then I know what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. And if there's any disconnect with either of those, then it can be extremely stressful for me as an employee in that space. So what we wanted to do is just to unpack that a little bit more in terms of that role clarity and have you viewed yourself to have a moment of self-reflection in this space. So role clarity is achieved when a person understands their role, responsibilities, authority, and accountability, what's within their remit. And when people, however, what people have in their job description and what they actually do or are expected to do often don't align. And a lack of role clarity, as we know, can be a significant psychosocial hazard. So in terms of that self-reflection piece, we want you to think about your job title and your description. Is that the same as what it was last year? We'll also want you to think about, what have you focused on in the last 3 months, your achievements and your challenges? Was that the same as last year, if you're still in the same role? And thinking about your job description, how much of what you've focused on and achieved over the past 3 months is actually detailed within your job description? And so this piece of work comes from The Science of Happy Employees by Brenda Jamnik, and highly recommend, if this is of interest for you, to explore that a little bit further. So with that self-reflection, I'm not sure about you, but when I was thinking about these things, my job looks very different to what it did 12 months ago. And so if you have staff that are sitting in this space, then that could be a source of stress for them. Am I doing what I was originally employed to do? Okay, so let's look at some strategies to manage workload. So we would highly recommend to identify the key sources of the high workload. So where is that coming from? Is it a particular project, a task, or is it expectations from a client? We would also recommend that there's open, transparent, and authentic communication between staff members and management in terms of workload. So what is going on for that particular person? And maybe there might be a need for some reasonable adjustments. So some short adjustments for a period of time to allow that person to get through that period of time. We mentioned before about that circle of influence. So what is within your control and what is not? What is changeable and what is not? And we'd like to share with you something called a priority matrix. This can be really helpful to drill down in terms of key priorities and goals in terms of what's important and what's urgent and where you should be focusing your attention. So we'll unpack that for you soon. And the importance of communication. There's no such risk as over communication, and particularly when you're working within a large team or within multiple departments within an organisation. So communicating with relevant stakeholders about the workload issues and what your priorities are and how your role fits within the rest of the organisation or the rest of the team. So let's look at this priority decision matrix. This can be a really helpful tool to utilize when someone's feeling very overwhelmed in terms of their workload. And so this is broken up into tasks that are important and those that are urgent. And so honing in on those tasks that are not important and not urgent, so this is quadrant 4, these are the type of activities you want to eliminate, get rid of them. No need to even be focusing on them. And if you're wasting your time at work on these activities, then that's a problem. The person might be feeling bored, maybe they don't have enough variety in the work that they do. If we then moved over to tasks that are not important but are urgent, so there's some urgency in terms of needing to be done quickly, but it's sitting low on the priority list. So these types of activities or tasks we want to minimize. We want to spend time on them, but not too much time on them. So it needs to be done quickly, but not labor on it too much, like emails that are coming through and things like that. If we now move our attention to tasks that are important but not urgent, so there's no time frame associated with it, but it is something that I need to get done. There's an importance to that. Someone's waiting on that piece of work potentially from me. So needing to focus on these tasks, get them done, but maybe you could put it off for next week. So you could prioritize it in that way. Now, those tasks that are both important and urgent, this is where you need to be focusing the majority of your time. Now, we're hoping that not all tasks are fitting into quadrant 1 there, that you have a bit of a split of some of those tasks, but this is really where you've got a deadline or there is a crisis or something's popped up and you need to devote your attention to that. So we hope that this priority matrix is a simple tool that you could utilize either for yourself or with your staff in terms of trying to break down where tasks should sit to help someone with their workload issues and time management. So now I'm going to throw back to Miriam, who's going to talk about work-life balance, and I'll join you again later.
Beautiful. Thanks so much, Simone. But there was a lot there, and hopefully you've all grabbed a few ideas around how to better manage workload and just knowing that the communication really is a cornerstone of that. So let's now have a look a bit more into the work-life balance piece, because this is a really interesting topic of conversation, and it's actually quite contentious too. So just out of curiosity, because we probably all have our own ideas and experiences around what we think work-life balance is and what we ought to be achieving, we would like to know your thoughts and experiences perhaps on this particular topic. So if you're feeling bold and you're willing to share, we would love to hear from you. What do you think about work-life balance? Realistic? Unrealistic? Have you had some success in this in the past? Or is this really quite a challenge that you're still facing? Throw in the chat anything you'd like to mention about that. Simone, how do you go with work-life balance?
Well, I've got a small team that I manage, but I also have another small team at home that I manage as well. So I've got multiple hats, and it can be a real struggle at times, particularly if I have a lot on my plate or if I'm traveling a bit for work. So for me, it's an ongoing pursuit to ensure that I'm trying to balance both of those things as best as I can. We've got some comments in there. Thank you so much. So Anna, so this is a challenge. It's easier said than done. Agree 100%. And Bethany, she said flexibility on hours to be able to balance work. Whoa, they're all coming through now. Hang on, I got to make this a little bit bigger so I can see. Sorry, Bethany said flexibility on hours to be able to balance work and personal demands is super helpful. Agree. So flexible working arrangements, absolutely, 100%. And allowing people to do that is wonderful. Marie said, currently I'm very lucky to have a great team that allows and supports a great work-life balance. Wasn't always that way. Well, that's refreshing, isn't it, Marie, that you're now within a workplace that allows you to do that. Thanks, Amanda. We work from home up to 2 days per week, which gives us more time to ourselves. Love it. Joanna, thank you. She mentioned it's challenging when others in your team have a difference of perception of work-life balance, especially if it's the boss or manager who is the source of the workload. Agree. And when those values aren't aligned, it's very, very difficult if it's not seen as an important thing in your workplace, Joanna. So that is very, very tricky. Hopefully we can give you some skills and tips to help with that as we progress. Thank you, Kat. I think it's a challenge for everyone. Agree. It's important to schedule time for family and activities that I enjoy. Absolutely. One of the things that I used to do, particularly with exercise, is just schedule it first thing in the morning. So it was actually in my diary. So there are no excuses later in the day. I'm tired. I don't have, I've got to get this particular thing done, or, I couldn't be bothered now. And thanks, Emma. Work-life balance is challenging. Avoid work meetings during lunch breaks. Yes. And hopefully you don't consider this as a work meeting, you consider this enriching your own personal and professional life. And thanks, Laszlo. Taking specific time to switch off all work-related communications each day is very important. Yes. Disconnecting from from technology is so very important, and highly recommend that people do that where possible. Thank you so much. Wonderful.
Amazing. Thank you, everyone, for your contributions. And it's great that you've already been working through this in your own way. And as we go through, there might be a few additional tips that you can take away and integrate, or even bring into some of the work in your support of other people in your workplace too. So how can we rethink work-life balance? Look, just as a thought, because it's often idealized and misrepresented, we may need to change the way we think about work-life balance, or what we think are the goalposts, really. And knowing that it's very personal, because life is more work than just what we get paid for. And because of that, we do have some pressures on us to be able to schedule, prioritize effectively, and create ways and means in which we still get to do some of those pleasant activities like what you were talking about before, the things that actually really matter and make us feel like work. So sometimes it's a little bit easier to use the terms work-life blend, and sometimes even the term work-life integration is another concept, without going into detail on them, that some people prefer to use. We really like this infographic that brings a little bit of perspective into the space, knowing that somewhere between when we're born and when we move on from this life, there is a certain amount of life that gets the most amount of attention. And so in 168 hours of your week, where does your time go? And it's good reflection to do from time to time, knowing that we have a certain amount that is sleep and things that have to do with our domestic responsibilities. Then what is left? We've got work covering 34% of our life, generally as a generalized statistic. And then the rest of life fits into just 11%. So we have to make that count, and we have to create the ways and means in which we can maximize the opportunity to actually enjoy the life that we are working so hard for. And part of that is implementing boundaries. Before, in your comments, there was a lot of boundaries being mentioned. Boundaries with time, having flexible arrangements, being able to be mindful of technology. These are all ways and means of having boundaries in place. And leaders need to lead by example as much as possible in this space. People only feel comfortable in a team if they can see their leader, for the most part, reflecting those same values and choices. So we need to do our own personal work around our work life and our personal life, and creating boundaries for ourselves and communicating with others too. So for example, having some firm start and end times. And look, I know as I go through these, some of these are going to push your buttons, and some of them you're already feeling pretty good about that you managed to achieve that, or maybe it's on still your to-do list. Having proper lunch and rest breaks. And I love the fact that it was mentioned before, not scheduling meetings during lunch hours. Seems obvious, but this is a really important point. Taking the leave that we are entitled to get the breaks that our bodies and our minds need. Being able to communicate our needs. And I think this is where, as a coach, I spend a lot of time supporting people. How do they actually communicate their needs more clearly? How do they do that assertively? And how are they able to negotiate flexible work arrangements? There are some wonderful leaders, I'm sure, within the community that are with us live today and watching the recording, that are doing a great job of supporting good communication, but there's always ways and means in which people could probably communicate more clearly and assertively. How do we get the flexibility we need in our lives? Keep those emails contained, and a lot of that is personal boundary setting. Sometimes that's also having really good systems set up in your email that filter emails and allow you to focus on certain topics at a time. Know how to switch off. I have a lot of my time spent helping people learn how to get their brains and their bodies switched from work mode to non-work mode. And having a clear strategy of how you do that, sometimes using visual cues or a particular moment or a way that we visualize something, that can help us move from one mode to the other. Very important. Being super mindful around technology, that's already come up a couple times today. How do we push up against expectations of us being available all the time? Coaching often focuses on how do we learn to say no, or how do we give ourselves some time and space to pull back from the automatic desire to please and say yes to people. So how do we get out of that habit of people pleasing too much, knowing how to manage our demands with a greater compassion for ourselves and our capabilities, and creating our own to-do list, but also to stop lists. Have you got one of those? If not, maybe that's something worth considering. How do you create something that might just encourage you to keep on top of what you don't need in your life, or can put a cap on? So saying no assertively is a big part of that. And if that's not something that you're great with, get some support from someone, some coach, mentoring. Maybe your EAP provider can also help you with that too. And definitely give up trying to please everybody. It is simply not possible. Within the workplace context, we certainly support organisations to make sure that their initiatives and policies are as well designed as possible to support staff to be able to do as best job as possible with managing their workload and their stress. So it's already come up, and I'm sure these are things you can start to tick off in your mind, those flexible and those hybrid or remote work arrangements and options. They really, really do make a difference for people, as reflected in the comments before from you guys. Those EAP programs, in our last webinar, webinar 3, we looked at initiating mental health initiatives and talked about some of these types of things, including EAP programs, which are often underutilized for the range of skills that they have to offer people in terms of managing stress and distress, which can include how do we manage our workload, how do we communicate more assertively. Having those workplace wellbeing and mental health initiatives, putting them in place and engaging your staff in ways that are meaningful to them and encouraging and engaging, that's going to help as well. Being consistent in your messaging from the top down of your organisation, ideally. But again, we consider that circle of control, circle of influence. What can you play your role in? And certainly being really clear about what your expectations are of people. And if work-life balance is something your organisation tries to encourage or believes as a value, make sure that's consistent in the way that messaging is delivered. Of course, leaders who authentically walk the talk are going to make a massive difference too. And as part of that piece of leadership, being responsible and flexible with staff, when there is some signs that they're not coping with workload, where there are signs of stress showing, you need to be using your eyes and your ears and your heart to tune into that and to be responsive to what you're observing, because not everybody can or will speak up. Get creative and find solutions. I think there's always multiple solutions to a problem, and sometimes it's just the limited creativity that prevents us from feeling like we've got other options. So if you're not sure how to get creative, you might like the priority matrix as a tool to just help break out of maybe limited thinking and finding some other options, or get other brains involved, create a solution building think tank and see if there's other ways that this could be improved on. Always reviewing and adjusting workloads. If you have some opportunity to have influence in that, to make changes for your staff or yourself, given some tips on how that's possible, but make sure that's something that is consistently reviewed. Effective delegation definitely makes a difference, and knowing what people's strengths are and their interests can also help very strongly in this area. So really spread out those tasks to people who are capable of being able to do those tasks, not feeling like it just has to be yourself, and provide the resources needed for success. Sometimes integrating some more technology and tools to help us to enhance our productivity and time management are fantastic. Again, when we do coaching, both Simone and I often talk about how do we make sure people feel that they can be more productive and manage their time better. And there's always a few tweaks and improvements that a little bit of technology and additional tools can help with. More in this space, so we know that there are work-life integration programs that integrate work and life in a more holistic way. Now, this may be something that you were already doing in your organization and didn't realize it was a work-life integration program, but having things like family events where family are welcome to come along, be a part of something, a picnic, a special day, a celebration of some successes or milestones in the organization, they really do help improve that sense of well-being and connection, and are a way of integrating work and life. Having wellness challenges is also a great way of doing it, bringing some competition in, whether it's a team sport or a way in which the organisation encourages and provides some resources around how we can improve our wellness. Other team-based activities as well that can include family members or any other programs that promote a more balanced lifestyle, very highly recommended. Having a quiet space. Does your workspace have a quiet space where people can just sneak away that isn't the toilet to get some respite and rest from the intensity that is most workplaces? So yeah, it could be something like a first aid room, but it could be something else. There could be a room dedicated for quiet. And as we become more educated in the space of neurodiversity and understanding that there are members of our teams that may actually really require this for their mental and physical well-being, maybe thinking about where a quiet space could be helpful. If there's a budget and the opportunity and space, childcare and creche arrangements on site, they definitely help. We can even offer things like discounted gym memberships to promote wellness and encourage people to do things that actively relieve stress. Mention workplace sporting teams, they can be good fun. And look, sport is not just physical activities. You might have other types of teams in things like chess or some other kind of game. That's always great fun too. Bring in those workplace initiatives like yoga and meditation classes, maybe even offering something quite lovely, maybe from time to time, like little free massages for people, getting a nicer shoulder massage at your desk. Doesn't that sound nice? I could just go for one right now, actually. They're wonderful things and really can be really quick wins for helping people relieve and feel connected to the organization. Sometimes we can offer other types of benefits like physiotherapy visits. Maybe even implementing reminders on when to get up and move and take breaks to stretch. And look, that can be something we can encourage individuals to do. Or it could be something as part of a team initiative, especially because we understand the value of physical and mental breaks. Could even bring in things like healthy food choices, whether that's for free or available for purchase on site. We certainly do encourage, in terms of well-being and stress management, that there is some space that allows people a sense of well-being, which can be with fresh air, having some greenery around, natural light. And all of those things together are going to help with helping the individual feel connected to the organization, taken care of. And so that when the organization says we truly value work-life balance, then they can see the evidence of that and feel safe to be able to engage. So our final section is around stress management strategies and having the resources for yourself and for your team to be able to do this as well as possible. In consideration of stress, I really invite you to have a look at this stress curve, which is something you may have come across before. It's based on the Yerkes-Dodson law bell curve for those who love this type of stuff. You may be aware that we have a balance or an influence on us based on the amount of pressure that's put on us and the impact on our performance as a result on that. So what happens when we have very little pressure on us is we have very little performance. It's actually not great for us to have for much time, for a little bit of time, definitely, because that's where we get some rest and we get to recover. But if we don't have much stress on us, if we don't have that pressure, we don't tend to do much. And from a psychologist's perspective, that's actually not very healthy for us over time. As pressure mounts and increases, we start getting into more of a comfort zone with our performance, and we can really hit the peak, that optimal performance zone, sometimes called peak performance, sometimes called eustress, where that is the real idea, the marriage between the amount of pressure on us and our ability to perform. And I will just mention that what's missing in this diagram is resources. Resources are another important factor that allows us to manage our pressures as best as possible. However, when pressure increases, as you can see, then we start to see our decline in performance, where we start to see the signs of strain. And eventually, if it continues to increase, our resources deplete and we are in a state of burnout. Burnout is serious business. And if any of you have been through that, I feel for you. I have personally in the past, and I support a lot of individuals to go through the process of burnout recovery. It takes time and it is not easy. We would much rather people avoid and prevent burnout as much as possible. If burnout is something that you believe you might be experiencing, please seek help, because the right kind of treatment makes a massive difference. The sooner it's applied, the better we have in terms of outcomes. So what kind of signs are we looking for that might indicate we're experiencing strain or even heading into burnout? Well, these are the types of things we can look out for. And naturally, it is important to just mention there can be other possible causes of these signs and symptoms, but you would start to learn, and you probably already know a fair bit about yourself, what starts to show up in your brain, in your cognition, your thinking, where you might find it turning up into your body, signs that your body is not coping with the pressures and demands on you. Can come out in your emotions, especially in having difficulty regulating emotions and managing emotions. And it can also come out in our behaviors and ways in which we probably either not taking care of ourselves so well, or we find that we're not able to keep up healthy behaviors and start to sneak in unhealthy behaviors. So just reflect on your own self-awareness in this space and know that there are many more ways, even more than is reflected on this slide, that our brains and our bodies show our stress. So when it comes to stress management, look, this is a massive topic. This is a short webinar where we're just giving you some tasters to how you could possibly help yourselves in this area. We know that a holistic approach is the best approach, looking at things more broadly and ultimately finding the recipe that works for you as an individual. There is no one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to managing stress. And when we combine things that are practical, things that can help us to minimize or reduce the pressures that we have on us with problem solving or better time management, those strategies we touched on earlier in the webinar, with more relaxation techniques. Relaxation is the opposite of stress. If you haven't learned this yet, please take this one away. Switch on your relaxation response, really letting your brain and your body slow down. And when you do that and things start to switch off, you are starting to undo the damage of stress. Do things that are fun and pleasurable, be able to connect with other people socially, and making the changes in lifestyle. It all counts. In the workplace, there are certainly things that can be done to help manage stress best. And if you're in a position where you can engage some experts to come in to help your staff learn how to do this better, to inspire them with different options, and then even provide them with resources to be able to take that on and take action, would be really, really good investment. And we know that there is a good return on investment for these types of initiatives. Utilize your EAP if you have one to deliver stress management initiatives. Encourage and reward people who take breaks. It kind of goes against the old model of wanting to see people, working hard constantly all the time. But if you know your staff are working and performing, maybe you need to give them a pat on the back because you see them taking a break. Yeah. Think about switching up the messages and making sure people know it's safe and good to take those breaks. Having those to do and to stop lists, perhaps you might even want to encourage your team to consider taking it on. Taking those breaks, yep, moving that body, getting the fresh air. Have fun. How can you build more fun into the workplace? Fun relieves stress. Having a laugh massively relieves stress. Doesn't have to be long, extensive programs. Even just 5 to 10 minutes of something could be helpful. Connecting in with people you feel safe with, a friend or a friendly colleague can be fantastic. Trying to minimize interruptions. And sometimes we need to have conversations with our team, our staff, about how that is possible, putting some strategies in place to try and allow them to maximize focus and productivity. Where we can create a nicer atmosphere, something that feels homely, that feels welcoming. Where do we build in more green, having plants, maybe some photos, a little bit of soft music can also be fantastic. And I know organizations do bring in some music and other things to help with that too. If you know that stress is affecting you, the sooner you can speak up and talk to the person who's got some influence or control over that with you can be really important. Having more one-on-ones to be able to work through and create some solutions, or even to talk about ways and means to be able to manage stress, really helpful. Communicate regularly. We've got to keep others informed and negotiate changes if needed. Having more positive and inspiring messages can be a great strategy, especially in common areas. So I'm just going to touch on this for a moment because I do want to give us enough time for questions and answers, which we'll be heading to very, very soon. So we might go slightly over time, and if you're still around for questions and answers, please do. Stress management, we do need to make sure we have the right lifestyle factors in place. And this is where a lot of people focus attention, and for good reason. Getting a good diet in, eating well nutrition, having a limitation on alcohol and self-medication, engaging in regular exercise, things that we enjoy, and get those hormones pumping and those mood stabilizing chemicals going too. Getting enough sleep, very important. If this is an area that you struggle in and you haven't sought all options, there are certainly some amazing practitioners and strategies and therapies that can help. And making sure we get enough of our vitamin D, which through natural light or supplementation can be major. So we know that there's a good biopsychosocial approach to good stress management, and this is just another little summary of things that can really make a positive difference to managing our stress. So hopefully you got the message. There's no one size fits all approach, and you've got to find the recipe for your well-being. When we do implement different strategies and change, give it a chance to do the magic for you. Don't expect 5 minutes of a mindfulness meditation to take all your stress away. That's not going to happen. But if you're doing it every day for a little while, you might just start to see a difference. So that is the content for today. I'm going to throw back to Simone to tell us about our upcoming webinars and to offer time for Q&A. Thanks, Simone.
Thanks, Miriam. Hopefully you've taken away some great strategies there, or some reminders, or some little golden eggs that you can go back to discuss with your team. We have 2 more webinars coming up before the end of the year. So webinar 5 on the 9th of October, we'll be looking at enhancing employee engagement and productivity to help to contribute to a positive work culture and organisational success. Then our final webinar in this series will be on November 13, and we'll be looking at sustaining mental health initiatives, ensuring that efforts to promote employee wellbeing continue to thrive and evolve over time, not just a one snapshot and that's it in that space. So we would love for you to get in touch with us. So please feel free to reach out to us directly. After this webinar, everyone who's attended will receive a recording of the webinar. And if we can help in any way with your particular organisational needs, then we'd love to hear from you. We'd also love to receive some feedback, whether this webinar has been helpful for you. You can scan the QR code now, and we'll also send you a link after the webinar. It doesn't take too long, and we really do value that, your feedback, in terms of whether this is hitting the mark for you or whether we should be focusing on some different topics at hand. We have 3 minutes for Q&A. If anyone does need to leave us now, thank you so much for being here today. But we have an opportunity to answer some questions for those who do have some burning questions in this space. Thank you, Kat. I hope you have a great afternoon. But we'll just give you a moment there to, if you had some questions on your particular industry, the size of your organisation. Thanks, Annie. Or maybe some great strategies or something else that you wanted us to look at. So thanks, Mark. Okay, Mark has a question. How do you go about identifying stress in others if they don't seem open to acknowledge it in themselves? Remember the slide we had in terms of some of those signs and symptoms. So if you, as a manager, first and foremost, you need to know your staff. So you need to know that there's been a change in behaviour for that staff member. So first of all, get to know your staff. Then second, if you notice a change, have a conversation. If you're coming from that place of care and concern, you're not going to stuff it up. It's just leaning in and just saying, are you okay? So asking that question and having that conversation with them. And then hopefully through ongoing communication, that trust builds and that a relationship forms, and then you're able to give some constructive feedback to say, I know that you're saying you're okay, but I'm noticing X, Y, and Z in you, and I'm concerned about you in this space. If you've got EAP available, you can suggest that to the person, and normalizing it. So not sort of individually pulling out that person to say there's something wrong with them, or that they need to be managing their stress within the work, or singling them out in some way, but just leaning in with care and concern and trying to help them to get the help that they might need. But it might just be you asking that question at the outset, are you okay? So I've got a few more questions. Could you continue?
Absolutely. Let's have a look at Joanna's question. So
Yep.
First of all, great answer to my question before. Thanks, Simone. So Joanna asks, what are your recommendations on tactfully discussing boundaries with upper management or executives who are perpetuating the always checking emails even at midnight mentality? Great question, Joanna. I'm sure a lot of people can completely relate to that. And look, the first thing is your consistent messaging. And part of that means that you also need to know within yourself that your boundary needs to be solid no matter what. I guess one of those things that's very difficult is feeling like you need to constantly please upper management. And while there may be some truth to that much of the time, they may not even realize just how unhealthy and what the impact on these kinds of loose boundaries are on people, because that's the way that they operate. And that's what they expect everybody else to operate with as well. Just start with the consistent messaging, not going to be answering emails. I love having a little part of an email signature that just sets expectations for people in terms of how long you will be before you might be responding to an email. And you may even put in there, I make sure that I don't touch my emails between this hour and this hour, so please do not expect a reply during those times. Consistent messaging. You may not change them, but eventually you'll change the way they see you and work with you. I hope that is helpful in some way. Do you have anything else on that, Simone?
Yes, Miriam, Kat has just popped in there, the right to disconnect legislation. I concur that that is also a perfect segue. And I'd be pushing back on management to say it's a psychosocial hazard to be connected 24/7. What are you doing?
Yeah, that's right.
That's not healthy, and that's not a good role model for our organisation. If you choose to do that, that's your prerogative, but I'm not going to be. And I'd be assertively in that space, standing your ground. I know there can be some pressure, but I wouldn't be engaging in that type of behaviour, even if the whole VLT is doing it, as an example. There was also another question there as well from Joanna, just sort of
I think it was a flow on from the
with
question
Mark.
around checking
Yes.
in with staff.
Yes, which is just, yes, you could take them out for a coffee to discuss in a different environment. And that allows them, and I'd also encourage sort of walking meetings. Often when you're walking side by side, someone versus confrontationally I'm sitting across this person is a way for them to open up. Or if you travel for work, so being in the car with that person as well, it's sort of like, well, the best conversations you have with your teenagers are in the car, they're trapped. And it's not confrontational. So not saying that we're trapping our staff members, but just allowing open dialogue to happen in an environment that feels a bit more natural than on a one-on-one, and could be a bit intimidating with that power balance or power imbalance. I'm not sure if there are any other questions that have popped through. For those who need to go, thank you so much. We're just 1 minute past 1 o'clock now. Thank you so much for those lovely comments from everybody. And we really do appreciate you joining us today. And if you've got the time to give us some feedback, we'd love that as well. And we hope that you've taken away some things to think about, that you can go back with your team. We got a big thank you in capital letters. Thanks, Joanna. That's lovely.
We really appreciate that. Thank you, everybody. We'll be following up. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you at a future webinar.
Thank you so much. Bye for now, everybody.
Everyone.